teams left in the state, and we happened to play the semi-state in this minor league stadium that was in Richmond. So we were going to play Carmel. Now, Carmel's that school from Indiana where all the rich kids hang out, okay, up in Indianapolis. So we wanted a piece of Carmel. So we played Carmel that morning on a Saturday, got ahead 5-1 going into the bottom of the seventh, and we were celebrating, okay? We popped the cork a little bit too early. Before you knew it, Carmel had tied it up. The score was 5-5. They had the bases loaded, nobody out. You should have seen that stadium. You could have heard a pin drop. I had my glove off. I was like, I can't believe this. All of a sudden, out of the dugout, here he came. Here he came. Out in front of the crowd. You're like being a center of attention. And he whooped that crowd out, and he got the rest of us going. He wasn't going to give up. Next guy popped up. Next guy hit a line drive to third, and he stepped on it. We got a double play and got out of the inning. We won an extra 6-5, and I still credit it. We'd have gone down if he wouldn't have got out in front of that. Now, our town had this sports writer named Mike LaPresti. He went on to be USA Today's #1 sports writer. He could tell some tales in the newspaper. What we wanted to do was read about ourselves. So we couldn't wait to get the newspaper out and read about our escapades. So he set the stage for that night. The night game got rained out, so it was pushed to Monday. He'd written about it. And all of a sudden on Monday night, 4,500 to 5,000 people showed up standing room at this stadium. Oh, that was just made for Gary. Okay. Gary didn't play in the first game, and he probably wasn't going to play in this game. But during the state tournament, what happens is they call every player out. They run out onto the field, and they call the starters out. So Gary was an expert of running out onto the field just to have his name called. 4,500 people, he whipped into a frenzy. We won that game 7-1. We're off to the state finals. Couldn't wait to see what was going to be in the paper the next day. Read about it. So we're waiting by the Gary's mailbox for the 3:30. Paper comes by. I said, you wait here, I'll get it. I get the paper, open it up. Above the fold, one picture. Picture of Gary Sweigart with his hat on backwards, his shirt untucked, and he's standing there like this. I was like, you didn't even play. And I kid you not, the caption said, player Gary Sweigart celebrates so-and-so. He was the spiritual and the inspirational part of our team. Later that week, they had a call-in radio show that people would call in as we were getting ready to leave to go to Indianapolis to play for the state championship. You know, girlfriends, other people were calling in. So there was like 6 of us sitting around a car radio listening. And then this call comes in. We used to have it on tape, and I've lost it somehow. Yes. My son is on the team. His name is Gary Sweigart. He doesn't get to play that much, but he leads the team in prayer, and that's more important anyway. Now, that is true, Barb. But he wrote it like he couldn't believe. Then we get to Indianapolis. State championship will be played at the minor league stadium. Night before, had steak, practiced, went over to stay at the Sheraton. Big time for all of us kids. The only problem was, certainly our athletic director didn't know at the time when he booked the reservation, they were holding the Miss Teen World pageant final. Gary Sweigart, the Miss Teen World pageant, was like a moth to a light or north to south magnet. I can remember Rusty Lasher and I, we shared 4 of us in a room, Rusty and I in a bed, Gary and I think it was Bobby Cosgrove. We didn't see him the rest of the night. Gary comes in our room about 3, wakes Rusty up, and he was telling him about some of his escapades. Rusty looks at him and screams at us, Gary, we got state tomorrow. He goes, I know that, but we got Miss Teen World right now. I saw him at 7 o'clock next morning. He's beat. We go out to the practice. He was like, I ain't playing anyway. So, and he was still going to cheer. But coach tells him, guess what? You're DHing today. He's like, really? Who am I hitting for? He's like, Morgan. So he went and he DH'd for me. Guy threw a 94 miles an hour first time up, hit a BB up the middle. And he walked another time. We lost that game 6-5, but as you can tell, they're memories that will last forever. The thing I remember most about that game too was the introduction. He was going to be the last person called out on our team because I was usually batted 9th, and he was going to call me out of center field, and then he was going to come out as the DH. So everybody was out on the field. Last name called. Batting 9th, the designated hitter, Gary Sweigart. And here he came. I'd never seen anybody run like this. Evidently, he'd been practicing this for a week. And he got up there, and he got to me after he did all the little stuff he did. I was like, Gary, what was that? He goes, that's my state run. I've been practicing. And it went something like this. Then one time I was down visiting Gary. Must have been before Brody was born. It was probably 2000 or something. I was down there buying a car. Gary's like, hey, I got a softball game. You want to come out and watch? Like, absolutely. He'd been telling me probably some yards, telling me they hit about 700 and doing all the other stuff. So I was like, oh, sure, Gary, I can watch. So before the game, Gary and I and Linda are sitting in the stands. I was like, hey, Linda, you ever seen Gary's state run? She's like, no. I was like, Gary, show her. He's like, shut up, dude. Come on, Gary. He's like, shut up. He was like, oh, sure. So I tried to show her that lame thing I just did right there. So the game starts. Gary's in left field. First inning, ball goes out there. He's stumbling like a drunken sailor to go after it. Closes his big glove. He's got too soon and he misses the ball. Throws the ball over the cutoff man's head. He batted 2 other times. The first time he popped up to the pitcher. Then I think he barely got it to the shortstop. Their team is up by 10 or 12 runs. He's coming up to bat in the last inning. I got it. I'm going to egg him on. I walk down to the fence. It's like, gee, man. Like, what's going on? He's like, well, contact problems. And I recited his game just like I did it. He missed a fly ball, he over the cutoff man, popped up twice. I said, I'll be honest with you, Gary. If I was the manager, I'd just cut you right now. And I knew if I could egg him on, he'd always rise to the occasion. You just get back up there and shut up. I'm like, okay. So I go back up there, and God is my witness, this is true. I go sit back in the bleachers. He comes up, he steps into the box. He calls timeout. He does this. Points at me, takes his bat, and points at the fence. Much like Babe Ruth, he's calling a shot. He's calling a shot. He's got disaster written all over him. Next pitch, whack. He hit it out of the park. I looked over at his car dealer buddies, and they're going nuts. They couldn't believe it more than I did. And you could tell how much they loved the man. They were celebrating like they'd won the 7th game of the World Series. About that time, Linda's grabbing me, shaking me, going, look, he's doing the state run. All the way around the bases. I just want to tell you a couple more brief stories, if you'll let me. Gary the student. Gary, innately intelligent to people that knew him. He could add Yahtzee, dice, and cards faster than anybody I knew. He just wasn't interested in doing homework or other things that didn't entertain him at the time as we were growing up in high school. 2 quick stories. We didn't take a lot of classes together in college because I was in college prep courses and he was in fun prep courses. But I wasn't good at math and chemistry. I guess they call it chemistry, like John was. So I took Earth Science. Gary was in Earth Science. I did like English, so I took the masterpieces. I kid you not, back then, Brody, they had classes called Sports Heroes and Comic Book Heroes. That's what your dad took. So we were in this geometry. We were in this Earth Science class together. You have those science tables 2 times. Why Bachtorf let us sit together, I don't know. So I blame him for that. This little guy, glasses, about 5'7", and he talked like this. I just did. I'm not trying to make fun of the man. But Gary, he'd start with my table, and then by halfway through the thing, he'd already put it back at the table by himself. He never turned his homework. He finally said, Gary, if you don't turn in your homework, I'm going to call your mom and dad. He's like, look, Mr. Bachtorf, I can't turn in my homework because I lost my book. He's like, what about your buddy there? He's like, well, if I took his book, he couldn't do his homework. This went on for about a month. Gary, no, hadn't found my book yet. But if I find it, Mr. Bachtorf, you'll be the first person who knows. Field trip coming up. We are going out to the cemetery to check out weathering on tombstones. We get on the bus. Naturally, I ride with Gary. Get off the bus, Bachtorf grabs me because you watch Sweigart. I was like, oh, well, no problem, Mr. Bachtorf. So we're out there about 5 minutes milling around. Gary calls me over. He's like, come here, dude. I said, yeah. He's like, see if you can find a textbook. Anybody's out here. So one of the nerdy kids has got one. So I look around. Oh, there's the little girl over there with her book open looking at the tombstone. So I walked over and said, hey, can I borrow your book for a second? She gives it to me. I take the book back to G. I said, what you got in mind? She's like, just give me the book. He goes, go talk to Mr. Bachtorf in about 2 or 3 minutes just to serve, don't let him look over. I'm like, okay. So I go up to Mr. Bachtorf. I said, Mr. Bachtorf, would you come over here and look at this stone? I'm puzzled by the type of weathering this might have caused on it. He was just so excited someone actually cared about pursuing education. So that went on about 3 minutes. All of a sudden, you heard this thing. Luke, Mr. Bottorff! Luke, Mr. Bottorff! Luke, I found my book! I found my book, Mr. Bottorff! I found my book! Bottorff turns around, and bigger than life, there's my best friend, Gary Sweigart, who has shimmied up a tombstone that was shaped just like the Washington Monument, and he's sitting on the top of that thing with a pointed button, and he's waving that book at him. Bottorff looks at me and he said, "What do you got to say?" I was like, "The man found his book." SATs. Young people, you're going to have the opportunity to take the SAT one day, and somebody's going to tell you it's important. Get a good score, go to college, make something out of your life. Well, Gary, myself, and Rusty all took the SAT one day. Earlham College. Gary was going to drive. Good. I didn't sleep the night before. Girlfriend problems. Gary didn't sleep the night before. Won't go into that. So we all get there. He's mad because he has to get up at 7 o'clock to go to take a test that he has no business or interest in taking. So we go into Earlham College, 50 of us in there, and there's the learned little man that's the proctor. On the board, he's got written out, Scholastic Aptitude Test. He gets us all in there and he tells us, "Hey, this is how we're going to do this. It's going to take 3 hours. You get a break every hour." Once he's done that, he tells us how important it was. Good for him. It was important. Give everything you got. It can affect your life. Takes the stopwatch. I start. I'm like, I'm in big trouble here. Probably should have slept. Probably should have stayed. 10 minutes into it, you're just rustling. Look over. Gary's getting up. He's walking toward the learned little man. He's like, "I'm done." He's like, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm done. Look, right here. Got all the answers filled out." That guy went off and was like, "Son, evidently you don't understand what you're doing for the rest of your life by not taking this test seriously." Went on and kept grading him. So what do you have to say of yourself? He said, "Sir, all that may be well and true, but I do understand this. Aptitude is not spelled with 2 P's, it's spelled with 1. Walked up there, crossed out the P, marched out of the room with his fist up." I just can't make this stuff up. Our hero. But after high school, Gary went down with Rusty Blaster to Clearwater Beach to work at Buckets Beach and chase their dreams of being a beach bum. And I remember the day he left. He put a note in my mailbox that I still have. But praise the Lord, a year and a half later, it came back. And it was on again. By this time, I was working at Ralston Perina summer job. A good one, pay for school and whatnot. And 2 falls out of the year, I stayed there and worked through so I could pay for school, so I crammed 4 years of college into 5. But I got Gary a job there because I knew when focused, there was nobody better working. So we worked together at Ralston Perina for probably a year and a half. We had the second shift. We'd start at 3:30, work till 12. I'd stack bags. He'd drive the forklift. He could do anything in the plant. We'd get off, play ping pong for 3 hours, and then go get something to eat, get back to my house about 5 or 6 in the morning. My room was down in the basement. It was so dark in there you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, but it wasn't cold enough for Gary. So we went and paid for this air conditioner. We bought used window unit out of the old thing so we could hang meat in there. It's about 55 degrees every morning we woke up. Get up about 1, eat, and go back to work and do it all over again. One day he calls me, he's like, "Hey, who's going to play in the city golf tournament?" He's a pretty good golfer, not as good as he thought, naturally. But he was in the B flight, and he was leading it. He's like, "Dude, I'm leading the B flight." We played at the public course. Now we're going over to the private country club. He's like, "Hey, come caddy for me." I'm like, "I'm in." He's like, "Meet me in the parking lot at 7. So I meet him in the parking lot at 7. And he throws this thing at me. I catch it, and it's a white asbestos suit. Evidently, I'm going to look like a master's caddy wearing a white suit. And he wrote Sweigart on the back. And I took that bag, and there we were, like a couple guys from Caddyshack out on the country club. His first tee-ball didn't go 12 feet. He shot about 90 and got beat by a 12-year-old. And I ran the whole time, "Gary, you get beat by a 12-year-old. 12-year-old went on to play 15 years on the PGA Tour, by the way. But it was also a Perina that changed Gary's life. That's where he met Linda. Linda was on a special work detail called Mini Friends. They brought in some people that were going to put this little bird seed and bucket and everything. I didn't pay any attention to it because I had bags to stack. He pulls the forklift up by me. He's like, "Dude!" I'm like, "What, Gary?" He's like, "There's 4 chicks over at the Mini Friends place." It was almost like the state again, Miss Teen World. So for about the next week or so, he couldn't get away from the Mini Friends. They about fired him, and I think Linda got fired because Gary spent too much time around him. She couldn't get her job done, or he was trying to do it for her. But She made an impression on him and changed the direction of his life forever. He's like, I'm going to date that girl. That's the young lady I want to spend the rest of my life with. She changed his life. She said, hey, Gary, you're going to do A, B, and C if you want to date me. He did A, B, and C. I'd never seen it before. I couldn't even get him to do A and B. He just got to do A, B, C, and D. He ended up quit Karina. No, he didn't. He got fired. He got fired, Bill, because he wanted to go to the Who concert and they wouldn't let him off, so he went to the Who concert anyway. But then you know what? He said, you know what I think I'll do? I'm going to try to sell cars. God loved me. He went up to the catalog dealer. He met a guy named Jerry Dills who took him under his wing. The rest is history in the car business. He instantly became a car salesman. He did that. He talked to Lindy. He said, let's move to Florida and start our life together. And they did. Not a whole lot in their pocket. Maybe a tank of gas and hopes and dreams. Their love and Gary's ability to sell cars. He got down and got a job at a Chevy dealer. They had a spiff. Sell the most of this, get a 27-inch TV. He tell them, I'm going to get that TV anyway. Have a spiff, get a trip. He took her on the trip because he was going to get that. You see, Gary learned the X's and O's of the car business and he knew it back and forth. But Gary knew people. That's what made him successful in that business. When he was in Florida, I'd meet him whenever I could. I'd go down to buy a car. 6 or 7 or 8, we were trying to add them up one time. I probably didn't need all those cars. Sorry, Chris. I just wanted to see Gary. Food was a big part of our life. When I go down and see him, if you knew Gary, food was a big part of his life any day. So we'd eat like Vikings whenever I was down there. One time on a trip, I got there on a Friday and we were going over and we stopped at Publix. I'm like, gee, what are we doing? He goes, we're on the way in. Okay. He's like, they got Toledo scales here that go over 300. So we went and weighed in on the Toledo scale, and he said, before we go to the airport on Monday morning, we're going to come back here and weigh it again. See who gained the most weight. I never won. You never lived till you've been to Vegas with Gary Sweigart. I'd meet him after he'd won a car dealer junket or something. I'd fly from San Diego. I'd get there, he'd slide me a hunch, as he called it. That was a $100 bill and said, here's a little seed money. Gary didn't play for 100 by these times. To see him at a table with playing 4 hands, $500 a pop, and have to be seen around it because he was the show, times I value for the rest of my life. Then there was a time I was getting ready to go to Okinawa. You bear with me, I'm almost finished, but I want to honor my friend. I had gotten orders to go to Okinawa for 3 years. And I ended up going 1 year by myself because of some family medical issues. So it was July of 2008, and said bye to the family. Somehow I talked my wife into, I didn't have to leave till Monday morning. I talked her into letting me fly down to see Gary on Thursday night for one last hoo-yah before I left the country for a year. Got there, we went out Thursday night, cried as I think it probably was. We ate like Vikings, like he always would. I mean, our belts were undone on the back of the car on the way home. At night, he got sick, I guess. I was snoring. Got up the next morning, Linda said, I had to take him to the doctor. He got gallbladder issues. That day, Friday, they took his gallbladder out. Brody, that time I was down there, introduced me to 5 guys. I've been hooked ever since. So he and I spent a little time together. Gary had his gallbladder out. Came home on Saturday night. Sunday morning, got up and he said, we're going to go play golf at this course that he wanted me to take me to. I said, Gary, we're not going to play golf. He said, yes, we're going to play golf. I couldn't tell him no. He took me out to play golf. Not because he wanted to, because he thought it meant something to me. Just like he taught me my first lesson in life about being unselfish when we were in church. The only currency you have in church as 6-year-olds is candy. I'd hide my good candy from Gary. He'd come in and open up his arms and say, pick what you wanted. That's the way Gary was. You didn't even have to know Gary for him to sacrifice for you. In 1995, he lived in an apartment complex. He was going to work. There was a fire in the building. People were screaming. He goes over to see what's going on. The fire department hadn't arrived. They're like, my God, there's an 80-year-old man in there and he can't get out. Gary Sweigart down on his belly, crawled into that apartment, pulled that old man out. Pulled that old man out. He needed him. 1995, state of Florida, named Gary, EMS Civilian of the Year. Last time I was down to visit Gary, Brody had a baseball game. I've heard the Brody story, so I wanted to go see the game. Now, I felt kind of bad because I remember when I played, he had visitors come and kind of put some pressure on you. And I didn't want to put any pressure on Brody. I kept telling him, hey, have fun today. Probably told him 20 times. He's like, shut up. Hey, make sure you have fun today. So I remember it best. First at bat, he got up, and I think they rung him up on a pitch that was a foot outside. There's nothing you can do about it. I think this is a time when you have some shin splint issues, if I remember correctly. So he walked the next time and ran the bases, and then I think he actually sat out an inning or two, but put him back in once his shin splints had settled down. So it was the last inning. He's coming up to bat. His pitcher was good, they put in by now. He was throwing hard. He had a wicked drop ball, kind of like Gary used to have. He came up. First pitch was a big old breaking curveball. Brody whipped at it, missed it 3 feet. Next pitch was a call, strike, or swing. I don't remember. And he's like 0-2, and I'm like, oh, come on, Brody. I think, don't strike out. Winner's like, Brody, don't strike out. I'm thinking, here comes that curveball. He's going to drop that curveball on him. It's going to be ugly. The 0-2 pitch came. It was a dead red fastball, and Brody hit that ball, and as soon as it hit his bat, I said, that is gone. And it was. And also was gone was his mom leaving that bleacher chasing that ball. It was swamp. I looked down at Gary, and he was headed down the third base line. Brody made the grand tour. After the game, I remember asking, did you have fun? And I talked to Gary. I said, Gary, what were you doing going down the third base line? He said, I didn't want him to see the tear in my eye. I said, I had a couple myself. The car business. As you all know, Gary, most of you hear from that. He started out, as I said, selling cars. Ended up being general manager of car dealership, salesman. A highly successful career. But Gary was frustrated. We talk often. He'd been at other dealerships where they'd been successful. Gary was an expert at turning dealerships around that were struggling on the front end. Turning them around. He'd done that a couple other places, and there was no loyalty to those other dealers. He ended up having to move on. Then he found the Furman Group. He'd tell me how they did business different. It was just 6-8 months ago. He talked about the Furman Group. Was, hey, these guys are not like any other car place I've ever worked. He said they value integrity and loyalty over the almighty dollar. And he said, I'll work here for the rest of my life as long as they have me. And I will tell you this, Mr. Furman, Mrs. Furman, Mr. Small, you all stood by Gary. You're thick and thin and supported him. And in the Marine Corps, we have a term we call that above and beyond the call of duty. And sir, I'm in debt to you, and on behalf of the Sweigart family, I thank you, the Furmans. You know, as we look back on life through the prism of time, and we mature, I look at Gary now, and I know from the time I met him, Gary was a quintessential leader. He was that person that you wanted to be around, that you had faith that everything was going to work out. He's what I call a dealer in hope. That's essentially what a leader is. When you're around him, things are going to work out. I don't care if it's your friends at work or whatnot. This is the person we need to follow because there is hope. And Gary, you were the biggest dealer in hope that I ever knew. There are a lot of people that want to tell you how you can measure success. If you let them, they'll tell you. But I found one simple way. Ask yourself this question at the end of the day. Did you leave it better than you found it? In your relationship with your family, your friends, your church, your school, your work. Did you leave it better than you found it? Gary Sweigart left us all better than he found it. He left this world better than he found it. And this man enriched my life, and he left my life better than he found it. I love him, and I'll miss you dearly.